The scent hit me first, an unfamiliar cologne clinging to Sophie's clothes like a ghost. It was subtle, the kind of fragrance that lingered in the air just long enough to raise a question, then disappear before an answer could form. At first, I ignored it. Maybe it was from work, maybe from a hug shared in passing. But then I heard the whisper. He can never know. I wasn't meant to hear it. Sophie was in the bathroom, door half closed, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. The words slithered through the crack in the door, lodging themselves deep into my mind. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart hammering. He can never know. The weight of those 4 words sent a chill down my spine. I walked away before she saw me. I needed to think, to breathe, to stop myself from rushing in and demanding the truth before I even knew what it was. My mind was already working against me, piecing together the little things I'd ignored. The late nights, the sudden secrecy with her phone, the way she'd been more distant but also lighter. Like a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. That burden, I now realized, was me. I didn't sleep that night. I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, my body stiff while she curled against me, her warmth suddenly foreign. My mind cycled through possibilities. Who was he? How long had this been going on? Was it just physical, or was she in love with him? Morning brought no clarity, only a bitter resolve. I needed proof. So I set a trap. A simple one. I kissed her before she left for work, lingering just enough to breathe her in. That cologne was still there, faint but unmistakable. I let her go, watching from the window as she walked to her car, phone already in hand. I waited 10 minutes, then followed. I told myself I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't paranoid. But paranoia doesn't feel like this, like the cold certainty that something is about to shatter. And I was right. An hour later, I found myself parked 2 blocks away from a coffee shop, watching my wife walk inside. Not alone. The man she met wasn't a stranger. Not to her. And not to me. Because I knew that face. I had seen it before, in old photos buried deep in family albums. In the sharp jawline I shared, in the same damn blood running through my veins. The man my wife was sleeping with was my half-brother. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The world outside the car blurred, the coffee shop and the street beyond it dissolving into the background noise of my pulse hammering in my ears. My half-brother. Sophie was sitting across from him, her fingers resting lightly on the rim of her cup, her head tilted in that way she always did when she was completely absorbed in someone. She used to look at me like that. Now, it was him. His name was Daniel. I hadn't seen him in years, not since I was 20, and he was just a teenager, a ghost from my father's past who had only surfaced in our lives for a brief moment before vanishing again. My father's mistake, my family's secret. My mother had never forgiven my father for his infidelity, and I had never forgiven him for the mess he left behind. And now here he was, sitting across from my wife, laughing at something she had said, his hand reaching, hesitating, before finally settling over hers. I thought I might be sick. How long had this been going on? Did they know? Did Sophie know who he was when she first met him? I forced myself to breathe, to focus, to control the storm raging inside me. Bursting in there now, demanding answers, wouldn't be enough. I needed more than confrontation. I needed the whole, disgusting truth. So I watched. They stayed for another 20 minutes. Their conversation was easy, comfortable. Not the kind of nervous, illicit meeting you'd expect from 2 people sneaking around. This was deeper. Familiar. This wasn't just a fling. When they finally stood, Sophie gave a quick glance around, paranoia flickering in her expression, but not enough to make her suspect she was being watched. Daniel placed a hand on the small of her back as they left. It was intimate. Territorial. I clenched my teeth, forcing myself to stay in my seat. I couldn't move yet. Not until I knew everything. So I followed them. I wasn't proud of it, but at that moment, pride didn't matter. Sophie's car led me across town to a small boutique hotel. One of those discreet, overpriced places where no one asks questions. I parked a safe distance away and watched as she walked through the doors with him at her side. No hesitation. No guilt. Just confidence. And that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. My wife had chosen my own flesh and blood over me. And now, it was my turn to make a choice. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my fingers ached. Sophie and Daniel had disappeared inside the hotel, and I was left with the bitter truth pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't lift. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was deliberate. The rage inside me burned hot, demanding action, demanding that I storm into that hotel, drag them both into the street, and expose them for what they were. But that would be too easy, too merciful. No, I wanted something more than just revenge. I wanted control. Sophie had chosen to betray me. Now, I was going to make her regret it. I pulled away from the hotel and drove without a destination, my mind racing. I could confront her tonight, throw her lies back in her face, and watch her scramble for excuses. But that wouldn't give me the full picture. I needed to know everything. How long had this been going on? Who had made the first move? Had she always been looking for an excuse to leave me? Or was this about something deeper? So instead of confrontation, I laid a trap. I spent the rest of the day acting normal. When Sophie came home that night, I was already in the kitchen, pretending to scroll through my phone, a glass of whiskey in my hand. She walked in like nothing had happened, smiling, kissing my cheek, asking how my day had been. I almost laughed at how easily she lied. It was fine, I said, forcing my voice to sound steady. Work was busy. Nothing exciting. She nodded, pretending to listen as she pulled off her heels and tossed them near the door. I turned the question back on her. And you? How was your day? Her hesitation was so brief, so well practiced, that anyone else would have missed it. Oh, you know, she said, stretching her arms over her head like she was exhausted. Meetings, errands, the usual. A perfect, practiced lie. She didn't know I had followed her. She didn't know that I had watched her walk hand in hand with my brother into a hotel room she thought I'd never see. I clenched my jaw and took another sip of whiskey. Oh yeah, I asked casually. Anything interesting happen? Her lips parted just slightly, an automatic, unconscious reaction to an unexpected question. Then she smiled, shaking her head. Nope, just another boring Tuesday. I swirled the whiskey in my glass, nodding slowly, as if I believed her. This was going to be easier than I thought. The game had begun. Lies have weight. They press down on you, suffocate you. But Sophie carried hers so effortlessly that I almost admired it. Almost. That night, she curled up beside me in bed, her body warm against mine, her breathing slow and steady. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how she could sleep so peacefully when the entire foundation of our marriage was built on betrayal. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The next morning, I started my plan. It began with a test. A small, calculated move to see just how deep she was willing to dig her own grave. Over breakfast, as she sipped her coffee, I set the bait. I was thinking of taking a few days off work, I said casually, stirring my spoon through my cereal. Maybe a long weekend. You and me, getting away somewhere quiet. Just us. Her reaction was subtle but unmistakable. The way her fingers hesitated on her coffee cup. The way she forced a quick smile, eyes flickering toward her phone, as if calculating something in her mind. That sounds amazing, she said too quickly. But, this weekend might be tricky. Work's been crazy. I smiled. Right. Of course. She relaxed, thinking she had escaped. That's when I struck. I could come to your office for lunch then, I said, watching her closely. Surprise you. We haven't done that in a while. This time, the hesitation was longer. Just a beat too long. Oh, she said, forcing another smile. That's sweet, but I have a ton of meetings this week. Barely any time to eat, really. Lie. I knew exactly where she'd be at lunch. With him. Sophie leaned over and kissed my cheek, whispering a soft, "Love you," before grabbing her keys and heading out the door. I stayed at the table, staring at my untouched breakfast, gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. She had no idea that I was 2 steps ahead of her now, and the first crack had already begun to show. Sophie thought she was playing me. She thought she could slip away, bury herself in her affair, and come home to a husband too blind to see the truth. But the thing about deception is that it only works if the other person isn't watching. And I was watching everything now. That afternoon, I followed her again. I had done it once before, and it had nearly broken me. This time I was numb. She left work at noon, just like I knew she would. She wasn't heading to a meeting, and she definitely wasn't grabbing a quick lunch alone. She was meeting him, Daniel. I tailed her from a safe distance, my grip tightening on the steering wheel as she pulled into the same hotel parking lot. No hesitation, no guilt, like it was routine. She parked, got out, smoothed her hair, checked her reflection in the side mirror. Then she walked inside, her pace steady, confident, like she belonged there, like she belonged to him. I sat in my car, feeling the full weight of it now. This wasn't just about sex. This wasn't some reckless fling. This was something deeper, something dangerous. I reached into my glove compartment, fingers brushing against the small recording device I had bought the night before. I had spent hours researching it, making sure it was discreet, reliable. If Sophie wanted to live a lie, I was going to document every second of it. I got out of my car, heart pounding, and made my way toward the hotel. I wasn't here to burst through the door and confront them. That would be too easy. No, I was here to listen, to watch, to make sure that when the time came, Sophie would have no way to deny what she had done. Because when I finally made my move, I wouldn't just take my revenge. I would take everything. I stepped into the hotel lobby, my pulse hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The place was quiet, discreet, the kind of establishment that specialized in secrets. The kind of place where no one asked questions as long as the credit card cleared. I walked up to the front desk, keeping my expression calm, casual. "Hey," I said to the receptionist, a young woman barely paying attention as she scrolled through her phone. "I'm meeting my wife here, but she forgot to text me the room number." Sophie Daniels. I watched her face carefully. The second of hesitation. The flicker of recognition. She glanced at her computer screen, then back at me. I'm sorry, sir, but we can't give out guest information." I forced a sheepish smile, leaning in slightly. "Of course. Totally understand. It's just, we're celebrating today. Big day for us. And I have this little surprise set up for her." I reached into my pocket and held up a small jewelry box, empty, but she didn't know that. Her eyes softened. "Just a hint." I asked. "I don't need the exact room number, just which floor. I'd hate to ruin the moment." She hesitated for another second, then sighed. "Fifth floor." "Bingo. Thank you," I said, flashing her an appreciative smile before stepping away. I took the elevator up, my heart pounding. This was it. I wasn't going to burst in. I wasn't going to scream, demand answers, throw fists. Not yet. I had a different plan. I found the room easily. 512. I didn't knock. Instead, I slipped the recording device just under the door, small enough to go unnoticed, sensitive enough to pick up every whispered word. Then I walked away, back to my car, and waited. 20 minutes later, Sophie emerged, hair slightly tousled, her lips curved into a small, satisfied smile as she adjusted her blouse. Daniel followed a moment later. My own brother. I watched them part ways, Sophie heading to her car, Daniel walking off with the same self-assured arrogance I remembered from when we were kids. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay put. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. I drove home, my mind racing. By the time Sophie walked through the door that evening, greeting me with the same easy smile she always did, I had already listened to the recording. And what I heard changed everything. Because this wasn't just an affair. It was something far, far worse. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my hands ached. The recording device sat beside me, its tiny red light blinking as if mocking me. I had listened to it twice already, each time more painful than the last. Sophie hadn't just betrayed me. She had planned it. She had chosen him. "I can't keep lying forever, Daniel." Her voice came through the speaker, hushed but clear. "Eventually, Jacob will figure it out. Then leave him." Daniel had replied smoothly, his voice infuriatingly confident. "You know that's what you really want." "It's not that simple," Sophie sighed. "He's a good man. He doesn't deserve this." A humorless laugh from Daniel. "If he was good enough, we wouldn't be here." The casual cruelty of those words made my blood boil. But it wasn't just what they said, it was the way they said it. There was no guilt, no hesitation. They weren't afraid of getting caught because, to them, I was already out of the picture. They were just waiting for the right moment to cut me loose. "We have to be careful," Sophie continued. "I don't want to lose everything if this goes wrong." That was when it hit me. It wasn't just about love. It was about power, about money. And suddenly, everything fell into place. The way Sophie had been pushing me to put more of our savings into her name. The joint investments she had insisted on handling herself. The little legal documents she had casually slipped into our routine over the last few months. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was preparing to leave me with nothing. I exhaled slowly, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. No, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I wasn't going to be the fool she discarded when it was convenient. She wanted to play games? I'd show her how they were really played. I took a deep breath, picked up the recorder, and headed inside. When Sophie walked through the door that evening, she kissed my cheek, smiling like nothing had changed. Like she hadn't just spent the afternoon wrapped up in him. I smiled back, steady and calm. Hey babe, I said, my voice smooth. How was your day? She sighed, kicking off her shoes. Exhausting. Just work, meetings, the usual. Lie. I leaned against the counter, watching her pour herself a glass of wine. I was done being her fool. Yeah, I said casually, swirling my own drink. Mine was interesting too. I found out something today. She looked up, her eyes flickering with curiosity. Oh, what's that? I took a slow sip, let the silence stretch. Then I smiled. That you can't trust the people closest to you. Her wine glass paused halfway to her lips. For the first time, I saw it, the crack. A flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She didn't know what I knew, but she was about to find out. Sophie's fingers tightened around her wine glass, but she forced a smile. A mask. A performance. She was good at pretending. I'd give her that. What do you mean? She asked, her voice steady, but I caught it. The tiny tremor beneath the surface. I shrugged, swirling my whiskey, keeping my tone light. Just, people aren't always who they seem, you know? You think you can trust someone, and then, I snapped my fingers. Turns out they were lying the whole time. Her smile faltered. A slow, creeping tension settled between us. She was trying to figure out how much I knew. I let her sweat. I took another sip, watching her carefully, waiting for her to make the first move. She did. Sounds deep, she said, forcing a little laugh. Something happened at work? Lie. Deflect. Redirect. Classic Sophie. I leaned against the counter, studying her. Yeah, actually, I learned something about investments today. Her shoulders tensed. Got you. I pretended not to notice. You know, like how easy it is for someone to move assets around without their partner noticing. Especially if that partner is, I don't know, distracted. She took a slow sip of her wine, masking her reaction, but I knew her too well. Her mind was racing. I smiled. Crazy, right? For a split second, I saw something flash across her face. Not fear. Not guilt. Annoyance. As if she was already tired of pretending. I wanted to laugh. She wasn't worried about losing me. She was worried about losing control. I set my glass down, keeping my voice casual. Hey, what was that thing you wanted me to sign last week? Something about our joint account. Her lips parted, her eyes widening just slightly before she caught herself. Oh, that, just a routine adjustment. Nothing urgent. Lie. I nodded. Good. Maybe we can go over it together later. A test. A warning. She knew it. I could see the calculations running through her mind, trying to decide her next move. If she pushed too hard, I'd get suspicious. If she backed off too easily, I'd know something was wrong. She chose neutral ground. Of course, she said smoothly, setting down her glass. Whenever you want. I smiled. Great. We stood there for a moment, locked in a silent battle. Sophie still thought she had the upper hand. She thought she could control how this played out. But she had no idea. I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was setting the trap. And soon, she was going to walk right into it. That night, Sophie slept beside me, her breathing slow and steady, but I knew better. She wasn't resting. She was thinking, calculating. So was I? I stared at the ceiling, the weight of everything pressing down on me. But instead of crushing me, it fueled me. She thought she was ahead, but I was already planning her downfall. The next morning, I set the next piece in place. At breakfast, I acted normal. I kissed her cheek, poured her coffee just the way she liked it, sweet, like the lies she told. I was thinking, I said casually, taking a sip of mine. Maybe we should meet with our financial advisor this week. You know, just to go over everything. Make sure we're on the same page. She didn't look up from her plate, but I saw her grip tighten on her fork. Why? She asked, feigning disinterest. I shrugged. No reason. Just being responsible. She forced a smile. That's a good idea. Lie. I saw it in her eyes. She didn't want me anywhere near our finances right now. Not when she was still in the middle of whatever she and Daniel were planning. Perfect. I was about to make her regret underestimating me. Step 1. Lock her out. That afternoon, while she was out, I visited the bank. I pulled every financial document tied to my name, combing through them like a detective at a crime scene. Sophie had been careful, but not careful enough. There it was. An account I never opened. In both of our names, at least, that's what the paperwork said. But I knew better. She had been shifting money into it. Preparing. For what? A future without me? A new life with Daniel? I didn't know. But what I did know was she wasn't getting another cent. By the end of the day, I had done what she never saw coming. I had frozen the account. Every last penny locked down, out of her reach. She wouldn't know until she tried to take something that wasn't hers. I almost wished I could be there when she found out. Almost. Step 2. Turn the tables. That evening, I started going through the legal paperwork she had given me weeks ago, the routine adjustments she had tried to get me to sign. She was planning to move half of my assets into her name. Half. And I was supposed to just sign it away without a second thought. I exhaled slowly, forcing the anger down. I wasn't just going to stop her. I was going to let her think she was still winning. So I signed the papers. Or at least, that's what she'd think. What I actually signed was a modified version I had put together with my own lawyer. A version that, if submitted, wouldn't just protect my assets. It would expose everything she had been doing. And when she finally made her move, she'd be walking straight into her own downfall. Step 3. Bait the hook. That night, as Sophie climbed into bed beside me, I turned to her, brushing her hair back. "You've been amazing lately," I murmured, watching her reaction. She smiled, running a hand over my chest. "I just love you, that's all." "Lie. I don't tell you enough," I continued, my voice soft. "But I trust you completely." I watched closely. The way her smile twitched at the edges. The way her fingers hesitated before continuing their lazy circles against my skin. She thought she had won. She thought I was blind. And that was the moment I knew. She was ready to betray me completely. Good. I was ready too. The next morning, Sophie left for work like nothing had changed. Like she wasn't carrying a storm of secrets in her carefully curated smile. I watched her from the window as she drove off, sipping my coffee calm. By now, she thought she was in the clear. She thought her plan was still working. She had no idea she was already falling. Step 4. Spring the trap. At noon, I got the call I had been waiting for. The bank. "Mr. Carter, we're calling to verify an attempted withdrawal from your joint account." I smiled. "Let me guess. Sophie Carter." There was a pause on the other end. "Yes, sir." "What was the amount?" $30,000. A long, slow exhale. She wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. I leaned back in my chair, letting the moment settle over me. "Decline it," I said, "and flag her account for suspicious activity." Another pause. Then, "Understood, sir." I hung up, staring at the screen. Now she knew. I imagined the moment she swiped her card, expecting to take what wasn't hers, only to be denied. I imagined the way her stomach must have dropped, the way her mind must have raced. She would be panicking now, trying to figure out what went wrong. And that was exactly what I wanted. Step 5. Watch her fall. Sophie came home late that night. I didn't ask where she had been. I already knew. She had spent the afternoon scrambling, probably calling Daniel, trying to figure out why she suddenly had no access to the money she thought she had so cleverly stolen. She walked in, tense, pretending everything was fine. I played along. We ate dinner. We made small talk. But there was something in her eyes now, doubt. She could feel that something was wrong, but she didn't know how much I knew. Then, as we were finishing up, she finally made her move. "Hey," she said, too casually, reaching across the table to grab my hand. "Can we talk about something?" I raised an eyebrow. "Of course." She hesitated, forced a small, sweet smile. "I was looking at our account today, and it looks like there was some kind of issue with the bank. I tried to take some money out, but it got declined." I feigned confusion. "That's strange." "Yeah," she pressed, watching my reaction. "Maybe we could go down to the bank together tomorrow, just to sort it out." There it was. She still thought she could fix this. I leaned back in my chair, smiling. "Actually, I already talked to the bank today." Her face froze. "They called me this morning," I continued, sipping my wine. "Something about a flagged withdrawal. $30,000, I think." She swallowed. Forced a laugh. "Oh, that was just me moving some things around." I froze the account, Sophie. The room went silent. She stared at me, the fake warmth draining from her face. "What?" "I froze it," I repeated calmly, watching her mask slip. "You won't be able to take any more money from me." Her lips parted, eyes darting as she tried to think of a way out. "Jacob, why would you do that?" I tilted my head. "Why would you need $30,000 so suddenly?" She had no answer. For the first time, Sophie had nothing to say. I stood slowly, leaning down until we were eye level. "You think I don't know?" I whispered, watching the fear flicker in her eyes. "You think I haven't seen the lies, the phone calls, the hotel rooms?" Her breath caught. "Jacob." I smiled. A slow, cruel smile. "I know everything." She flinched. She opened her mouth, maybe to lie, maybe to beg, but I didn't give her the chance. I picked up my phone, pulled up the recording, and pressed play. And as Daniel's voice filled the room, Sophie went pale. I watched as the reality of it hit her. As she realized, in real time, that her carefully crafted world was crumbling. She wasn't the one in control anymore. I was. And I wasn't done yet. Sophie sat frozen, her face drained of color as Daniel's voice poured from my phone speaker. Then leave him. You know that's what you really want. I watched her flinch, her breathing shallow. She knew there was no talking her way out of this. I let the recording play a little longer, savoring the way her eyes darted between me and the phone, searching for some kind of escape. Then I hit pause. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Finally, I spoke. How long, Sophie? She swallowed, her lips parting, probably to lie, again, but I cut her off. No more bullshit, I said, my voice low and even. I don't want excuses. I don't want fake tears. I want the truth. Her hands trembled in her lap. She knew she had lost control. A few months, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I tilted my head. Try again. She shut her eyes. Took a shaky breath. Almost a year, she admitted. I leaned back, exhaling through my nose. A year. A year of lies. A year of sneaking around, meeting in hotel rooms, whispering about when she would leave me. Not if when. I had been living with a stranger. Sophie wiped at her face, as if that would erase what she had done. I never wanted to hurt you, Jacob. I laughed. A cold, sharp sound. Really? Because you did a damn good job of it. She shook her head, her eyes wide and desperate now. It just happened. I leaned in, my voice cutting through the air like a blade. No, Sophie. Accidents happen. You made choices. She squeezed her eyes shut, a tear slipping down her cheek. Crocodile tears. I was going to tell you, she whispered. Were you? I mused, tilting my head. Before or after you drained my account? She stiffened. It wasn't like that. I laughed again. Then what was it like? Silence. Because she had nothing. I stood, walking over to the counter where I had left her fake documents. The ones she had tried to get me to sign, transferring half of everything I owned into her name. I held them up, watching her realize. What are those? She asked, her voice tight. Oh, I said casually. Just the papers you tried to trick me into signing. I tossed them onto the table in front of her. Only problem? I switched them. Her face fell. I stepped closer, towering over her now. So when you finally went to file them? I smirked. You actually signed over everything to me. Her mouth opened, then closed. Stunned. Speechless. She choked on the words. You wouldn't. I leaned down, my voice soft but lethal. I already did. Her hands flew to her mouth. I turned away, walking toward the front door. You have until tomorrow to pack your things and get out, I said. If you're still here by noon, I'll make sure every single person we know hears that recording. She gasped. Jacob, please. I didn't look back. You made your choice, Sophie. I opened the door, stepping out into the cold night. And now, I'm making mine. Then I walked away, leaving her world in ruins. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. By morning, the house felt different. Lighter. As if, even before she left, Sophie's presence was already fading. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, waiting. At exactly 11:45 a.m., I heard the shuffle of footsteps on the stairs. She was leaving. I didn't get up. I didn't offer to help. I just watched as she came down, her suitcase in one hand, a duffel bag slung over her shoulder. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. She hesitated in the doorway, looking at me like she wanted to say something. I raised an eyebrow. You're cutting it close. She flinched, gripping the strap of her bag. Jacob. I held up a hand. Don't. She shut her mouth. We stood there for a long moment, the weight of everything pressing down between us. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. I pointed to the table where the divorce papers sat waiting. Sign them before you go. She hesitated, but in the end, she did as she was told. Her hand trembled as she scrawled her name at the bottom of the page, sealing the end of us. When she finished, she let out a shaky breath. I never wanted this, she whispered. I stared at her, taking in the woman I had loved, the woman who had betrayed me, the woman I no longer knew. And I said the only thing left to say. Yes, you did. She blinked back tears, opened her mouth, then closed it. Because she knew I was right. With one last look, she picked up her bags and walked out the door. I didn't watch her go. I didn't need to. The moment the door clicked shut, I exhaled. It was over. She was gone. And for the first time in a long time, I was free. The end. If you like this story, please like and subscribe to the channel.